Are you ready to level up your 3D modeling skills despite practicing for hours? Overwhelmed by finding the right tools, workflows, or even creating proper topology? You're not alone. Many think mastering 3D modeling takes forever, but it doesn't have to be that way. I've been there trying to create 3D models for product design renders. This is what my 3D models used to look like back in college, and this is how they look now. Discovering the right workflow transformed my models from amateur to professional. I realized that you don't need decades. The right approach makes all the difference in the world. In this Maya 3D modeling tutorial for beginners, I'll guide you step by step to create a detailed 3D model with proper topology. In under 70 minutes, you'll be able to see a dramatic improvement in your 3D modeling skills applicable to film, product design, or creating your high poly mesh for video game asset production. I'm Jay Musi. I worked in film and video games, created educational content for companies like Autodesk, and have been featured in PC Mag for my 3D software reviews. To help you follow along, I provided high-resolution blueprints and in various formats of this 3D model. You can download them using the link in the description down below. Even though I use Maya 2024, the principle applies universally across softwares like Blender, Cinema 4D, and 3D Studio Max. Here's a quick breakdown of the project. We'll start the 3D modeling by creating the edge flow around the details on the top of the can using a flat plane. Then we'll shape the top of the can in 3D space. We'll use a similar workflow to create the tab of the can, completing the most complex details of this object. And finally, we'll create a series of extrusions to create the body of the can. So enough yapping, let's get started. We'll start here with a fresh Maya scene. A couple of housekeeping rules is that I'm working on a smaller screen just to get this screen recording properly. If you're working with a smaller monitor size, and in this case I'm working with a smaller recording size, I want to free up some visual real estate. The shelf is something that takes quite a bit of real estate, something that I don't use much. You can basically hide components of this interface that you're not currently using to free up some visual real estate. We are working with the modeling standard workspace here. We'll go to Windows, UI Elements, and I'm simply going to hide the shelf. You see how much visual real estate we're actually freeing up. I will show you every single command menu and how to access that tool natively. But once we get in a rhythm, since I'm trying to condense as much 3D modeling information into a short amount of time, I'm not going to be continuously going to these menus over and over. I will call out the tool and I will have a call out card. That way, if you're still a little fuzzy on how to access that tool, then you'll be able to access it with no problems. The last thing here is that I'm not going to be covering general navigation or general interface. There are plenty of good tutorials out there that cover that. I simply want to focus on the 3D modeling portion. So with all that said, let's begin. The first thing that we need to do is create a project. Creating a project is going to be very important, especially if we're working in a team environment or we're switching devices. Maybe you're working from a laptop to your own PC, and that way it's going to organize and house all the files properly, and it's going to ensure that those files are loaded up every time you open that project. We'll go to File, Project window. You see this is already set, but you can just hit New here, and I'm going to name this Maya project. This is going to be the directory that I'll be using. So once this looks good, I'll hit accept. And if for some reason your project is not set when you open up Maya after you created one, you can always go to File, Set Project, and then just simply find that project, hit Set. So now if we go to File and Save Scene As, you'll see that we already have a file. So I'm simply just going to save this again. You can turn incremental saves with Maya. I like to manually do it myself, and I just like to use a basic numbered structure like this, 001. We'll go ahead and override this, and this will be our first official save. And it's also very important that the blueprints here that you downloaded make it into the source images file. That way everything is nice and organized. So with that out of the way, we'll go ahead and bring in our first side reference here. So for that, we'll simply hit spacebar. This is going to expand our side view. We'll go ahead and bring in this via the image planes option. So we'll go to View, Image Plane, import image. And you see, since our project is set, this is looking at the source images for that blueprint. So we'll select that file, we'll hit open, and there we go. Since we have a floor plane here, what I like to do is actually move this image plane right here above this imaginary ground plane here. I'll hit spacebar to go to my 4 views here, and I'll hit spacebar once more to go into my perspective view. Something that I encourage you to do, especially when you're starting out 3D modeling, is set up initial scaling where it's roughly within that grid. The last thing that you want to do is create a model that's very, very small or very, very large, because this could affect tolerances like your bevel tolerances. It can mess up your rendering. So unless you have very specific measurements that you're working with, try to contain most of your objects somewhere within that default Maya grid. Now, what I'll do is I'll go to create polygon primitives, and we'll create a cylinder. And with this cylinder, it's actually going to help us set up both of these blueprints. So what I want to do is rotate this into place. I can click the rotate tool here, or I can hit E on my keyboard. This is going to activate my rotate tool. I'll hold down J, and what J is going to do, especially if we go here and we access our channel box, we see that holding down J is constraining to 15-degree increments within this rotate X. I'll jump back to the side view here. So I'll go ahead and scale this up, move it into place. We probably need a little bit more resolution here. So on the subdivision axes, I'll go to something like 28. I'll right click, I'll go to vertex mode, select my vertices here. We could go to the translate tool here on the left hand side, or hit W, and I'll simply move this up. I'll hit 4 on my keyboard, and this will allow us to go into wireframe mode. I'll go to shading and I'll enable X-ray, and now we have a nice X-ray mode. This will help us place this blueprint right in the middle. So I'll select the blueprint with the translate tool enabled. I'll simply move this into place like this, and selecting the object, we get the nice wireframe here. So this will further help us center this. I'm going to enable the scale tool here on the left hand side. We can enable it here, or we can simply hit R. But you see, having a physical object here is going to make this quite a bit easier. This is very important when we're creating symmetrical objects, that we get it right in the middle. That way we could use symmetry, especially on the world, and it's going to make our life quite a bit easier. So now that this is set, go back to the perspective view. So I'm hitting spacebar, and we simply want to just push this back a little bit. What that's going to allow us to do is have this object be in front of this. So when we go to shading here, turn off the X-ray, this is in front. So you see how this is in front, this is going to mess up the side view. So we're going to keep this in the back. Now we have to repeat the same exact process for the top view here. So we'll go to view, image plane, import image. Again, we'll select the blueprints, hit open. This time we need to move this into place. So again, I'll go to shading, X-ray, I'll hit spacebar. That way we could expand this top view, and then we'll simply move it into place. Something we can do in Maya is quickly move the pivot of any objects. So for example here, if we want to place this here, we'll have to zoom out, and this could be a little bit cumbersome. So what we want to do is hit D with this image plane selected, and we're going to move it to about the center of this. And now we'll hit W, which again, it's going to enable the move tool. And now we're a lot closer to here, and we could better reposition this in the center. And this is something that I usually work with quite a bit, whether I'm recording or not, is turn on your anti-aliasing, these little dots right here. And once you enable that, you see that your wireframes smooth out quite a bit, especially if you're posting any wireframe screen grabs and you're trying to display this as works in progress or on your portfolio. Definitely turn on this setting. Something that I just realized is that the top is okay, but this side actually needs to be the front. Honestly, for this project, it doesn't really matter since this is a perfect cylindrical shape. However, I will go ahead and load this side actually in the front. I could have edited this out of the video, but I want to show you that sometimes there's going to be some back and forth that you do when setting up image planes like this. So again, I'll go to view, image planes, import image, blueprints, hit open. I'll select this, move it into place, hit spacebar to maximize this, hit 4 to go into wireframe mode, and just moving this around like so. Again, we can hit D to enter edit pivot mode and then move this somewhere in the center, and then hit W again. And that way we could zoom in here and get a little bit more precision. And I'm just watching the corners here. So actually this looks pretty good. I'm only using this cylinder to place the blueprints. The last thing that I'll do here with my front view is push it back. And then for this view here, we could simply delete it. So we'll select this side view here and hit delete. One thing that we want to make sure is that while we're working, these blueprints are not selectable. And for that, I'm going to hit Control A twice. This is going to bring up our channel box and also our layers. So we'll select both blueprints. If we access the outliner here, we see that we have both image planes. Before moving forward, I'll go ahead and make sure these are named properly. So I'll rename this my top reference, and this is my front reference, just to keep the outliner clean. Now with both of those selected, I'll shift click both of these. We'll go to layers, create layer from selected. We'll double click this here, this layer name. We'll hit ref for reference, and then we'll simply set this to R for reference. Now when we're working here, these are no longer selectable. That's exactly what we want. The other thing that we don't want to do is have these visible within our perspective. So for that, we'll go to Show, Viewport, and we'll hide image planes. So now these image planes are not selectable in our orthographics, nor are they visible in our perspective view. This cylinder was just for placement purposes, so I'll hit delete and we'll begin modeling. You're doing great. You just set up the blueprints for your project. Having high quality reference images like this set up in the viewports of your 3D application will make the rest of the project move forward much smoother. Let's get to the fun part and start the 3D modeling. One thing that I do want to point out before we begin is I do have access to a energy can here that I'm holding as a physical object. If you have access to a real life reference, I think it's always good to have. However, you are welcome to find reference images online aside from these blueprints, especially to pull out the shapes in perspective view. Something that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Show, Viewport, and I'm going to hide the grid in both the top view here and also the front view. Something that jacked up my blueprints, the color mode on these. So if I go to my front reference, you see that it's set to RGBA. So if you have that problem, just switch this to RGB and you should get this looking properly. I'll go to Show, Viewport, and we'll hide the grid. So I'll hit spacebar, go back to my top view, and I will start modeling. I'm going to hide the attribute editor, show the modeling toolkit. We're going to create a cube. So I'll go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and we'll create a cube. I'm going to hit R to go to scale mode here, and I'll simply scale this. Basically what I'm looking to do is capture this height here and this height here. So at this point, I'll right click, I'll go to vertice mode, select my top verts, switch over to the translate tool, which can be done by hitting W. And we're going to go ahead and basically block this out and block this out, this curvature right here. I'll go ahead and select both of these verts. I'll scale in a little bit, and I'm trying to basically capture this line right here, and I'll repeat the same thing for the bottom. Something that I like to do is always work with symmetry, so I'll get the multi-cut tool, click Control middle mouse click. That's going to add an edge right in the middle, and this is going to be a nice symmetry line. Anytime that we do any hard surface modeling, I always want you to think about that symmetry line early on in your modeling process. From this point, we'll jump over to our 4 views. We'll go ahead and select these 2 edges here, and we'll use the bevel command. If you're getting a wonky result, that's because chamfer is off. So as soon as we enable chamfer, we see that we're getting that nice bend as we should. I'm going to zoom in here, play with the fraction. I'm going to put this all the way to 1. What that's going to do is actually go here and basically snap at this center vert. Then we're going to up these segments on this as well. So this curvature looks pretty good here. I'll go ahead and repeat the same thing here as well to get this curvature. So with this edge selected, again, I'll go to bevel, turn on chamfer, and make sure this is framed up quite nicely. I'll put up the fraction again all the way to 1. We'll go ahead and bump up these segments. Something that I'm looking at is I roughly want even quad spacing here. So I wouldn't want to have a gigantic quad here and then these very small quads. So something that I want to do is actually take one edge off this bevel. We should be able to do this quite easily by going into the history here. So this is the Poly Bevel 2, and this is the first one we created. So if we drop this down to 4, now we're able to affect the history here. Sometimes this can have adverse effects, so use this sparingly, always check your mesh, but this worked out well. Now that we have that initial curvature, let's go ahead and match this a little bit better. Especially here at the bottom, we are pretty far off from this shape, but we're gonna get that back rather easily. We're gonna jump to edge mode, and then we're gonna do control middle mouse click. What that's gonna allow us to do is push and pull along the normal. You see that by doing this, we're still getting that nice even spacing, but now we're able to get these edges a lot closer towards that original blueprint that we had. So again, it's control, middle mouse click, and I'm dragging left and right to push and pull along the normal. So now we properly got this curvature here. Looks like we're a little bit off here. So again, I'll select this edge in perspective, but keep an eye out on top view. And we could do the same thing here. So I'm selecting the edge, control middle mouse, click dragging. Something that's pretty important here is we don't want to alter this shape. So we don't want to move this edge, as this is pretty much a straight shot here. And we don't want to affect that pristine line that we have created. So what my game plan is, I want to focus and start with the areas of more details, of more density. Remember, details dictate density. So we're going to have to allocate more polygons here to carve out all these more intricate patterns and edge flow. Then after that, we're going to create a cylinder that's going to match up to the count here, or the perimeter of this shape. And we're going to be able to fill this in with a perfect cylinder. It's going to allow us to create these shapes. And that's going to be our initial focus, is to create the cap here of this energy can. So I'm going to jump into face mode. I'll go ahead and select this right half as we're working with symmetry. I'm going to go ahead and mirror this mesh. So I'm going to go to mesh mirror. Now in Maya, there are multiple ways of getting to the same result. So just because I get to it one way, there are probably 3 or 4 different ways to do the same exact command in Maya. Whichever one you choose is personal preference. So I'm actually not going to do my mirror this way, and you could tell that a lot of these I have already hotkeyed. But what I will do is shift right click, and I'm going to get to the mirror tool this way, which is actually a little bit quicker in my opinion than going up and hunting it down in that top menu. So I'm going to go to my option box. Cut geometry can be off. Set this to world. This needs to be in the X, and we can combine it with the original. We'll hit mirror, and there we go. So now this is one shape. What we can do is go in here, select both of these faces. We can extrude. So we'll go to the modeling toolkit. We'll go to the extrude button here, and then we'll do an offset and bring this in. Now, something you'll note here is when we created these verts look like they weren't merged. That's why we're getting some jankiness. I'm going to actually undo that mirror. There we go. So we just backtracked a couple steps, but this is an issue that you typically want to correct before you mirror. This was a result of that bevel. So what we're going to do is actually just do a vert merge command. We're going to select all these here. And actually for this, we could just select every single vert. We'll go to edit mesh and merge. And now these verts are merged. So if we click on one of these, you see that now this is properly set up. Now we can go back to shift right click mirror with the same options, and we should have a clean mirror. And mirroring, especially with wonky topology, is basically going to a lot of times create issues with your meshes. So remember, garbage in and garbage out, especially anytime that you're duplicating. Make sure that your meshes are clean before you duplicate, and mirroring is a form of duplication. All right, so we're back at square one. We're going to jump back to the top view here. We'll do a extrude command once more, and we'll play with the offset. Now we don't have any of that wonkiness because our verts were merged. I'm going to extrude one more time. To repeat a command in Maya, you can hit G, and that will redo your last tool. And again, I will go ahead and do another offset. And the reason I'm doing this is to actually capture this curvature right here. And we are going to need to duplicate it. I'm simply going to select these faces here. We're going to go ahead and select these 4 edges. I'll select my translate tool, and like I said, a million ways of doing the same command. And with Maya, you can hold down shift on any translate. As soon as we hit shift, we get an extrude icon here. That means that we could move and extrude at the same time. So this is another way that you could extrude within Maya. So I'll hold down shift, bring these down. We already have some curvature here. So what I'm going to do is actually just scale these flat, move this into place, and then we're going to manually start spacing these out. I'll take this vert here, inch it here. I'm going to take this face here and we'll delete it. And obviously we're going to have to do some topology work here to get this to properly quad out. So what I'll do is we can go ahead and start routing or breaking away from this shape. What I need to do is I'll go to the multi-cut tool. We'll drop an edge loop and we want to kind of continue this curvature here. So now that we have this selected, we can select both of these. We can create a bridge. Now we're going to have a pole here, and this is going to dictate a change in direction, which is kind of what we want here. So now that we have this set up, go ahead and just kind of space this out a little bit better. And now we can simply select both of these here. I can bridge this. Now we have this nice flow here. I need to divide these up. I could use the multi-cut tool, dropping edge loops in the middle, but I want a little bit more control of this initial loop here. So what I'm going to do is with the multi-cut tool, anytime that you can click outside of your shape, you're going to be able to knife through or cut through. Something you might need to do is actually hold down shift. And once you hold down shift, you can actually set a straight line. The other cool thing about this is that this line is not set until you actually hit enter. So you could move this and get the placement exactly how you want it. So now I can drop that edge loop there and I can do control middle mouse click just to get a edge loop here in the middle and an edge loop here in the middle. So this looks a little bit more uniform to me. The next thing that I'm going to do here is start setting up the opening of the can, and we're going to do that by basically extruding in, kind of working off this nice shape that we have. And then once we get closer into here, we'll manually position some of these verts to flesh out both of these edges here. I'll actually mirror the shape just for the sake of having a whole piece, and that way that manipulator is going to be in the middle versus having to always move the pivot for every extrude that we do. This might make sense once we start doing this. So what I'll do is I want to mirror this one more time, and I'm going to go to mirror options. Since we want to delete these faces here, the mirror tool does have a cut geometry option that we can enable. So we'll select cut, and what cutting is going to do is actually just get rid of one side. It's either going to be the minus or the plus. So everything looks good. We'll do a mirror. We lost a lot of information, and that's because we need to change the direction. So now we have a complete shape, and this is going to speed us up a little bit. Now we can select this entire loop. Again, we'll go to extrude. We'll bring down this offset, and you see that we have a nice edge here. We'll hit G one more time. Repeat that command, we'll extrude here, giving us that second edge that we need. If this is jumping all over the place, you could always do control and shift on any slider. We're going to drop down to 3 decimal places, but this is going to give us a lot more gradual control over these sliders. So this looks good. Now let's go ahead and zoom in and manually start moving these around. Something you can experiment with is with the proportional editing. In Maya, I actually call the soft select. So to enable that on any transform, you can double click the transform tool, go here to soft select. We can enable that and play with these settings. I'm actually just going to do that by hitting B. That's the native Maya shortcut. And you see that we're getting this color coding, meaning that we're in soft select mode. Now we can go ahead and move this, and you see that we're getting this to move as well. Now, if you hold down B and middle mouse click, this is basically the radius of that. So if you want to jack this up a little bit and control more vertices with a fall off, you can enable that. So I think this is giving us good control. And like I said, we don't really have to worry about anything on the right side, as we will be mirroring this over. So I'm going to continue to manually place these verts where they need to go. And from time to time, I will disable soft select mode. Now here, for this specific curvature, we're going to need a little bit more topology. This is just like creating a curve in Illustrator or any vector program. You're going to need more topology or more verts to define that shape and have it actually hold its shape, especially when we're going into subdivision mode. So this looks good. We'll go ahead and plop these guys down. And polygonal modeling, a lot of it is just going in here, getting in the weeds of these verts and making sure that everything hugs your blueprints or reference as close as possible. If at any point you want to push and pull these verts, basically work on your spacing a bit better, what you can do is use the transform constraints. So if we want to slide this vert between these edges, we can go to edge slide here, And now you see that we can slide along these edges here, and that allows you to basically break some of those spikes and even out some of your topology. All right, this is looking good. Now let's go ahead and go in here. This is going to be a matter of basically joining these faces up. So we have 3 edges here and 3 edges here. A great little tool is the heads up display poly count feature. So to enable that, obviously I have it enabled here, especially when you're trying to match up edges or edge counts to actually be able to bridge, and you want those to be even, you could actually use this feature here. It'll do all the counting for you. To enable that, that's under the display, heads up display, and poly count. So if we toggle that off, it's off. And to redo any menu command, you could simply middle mouse click. It'll bring up that option. So here we have 4, and here we have 4. We can shift right click, bridge. It's going to bridge that up. We want to match the divisions here. So we're going to need a division here, division here, division here. It looks like that's going to be 2 divisions. Will give us 3 edges. And then again, we'll select these here. So we have 6, which is perfect. Shift right click, bridge. If you want to pretty these up a little bit, you could always delete these here. And then with the multi-cut tool, you can go in here, kind of fill in these gaps and just fine tune that spacing. What I want to do at this point is get a count for these edges here. So it looks like we have 17 edges. I'm going to double click here and get a count. Looks like we're sitting at 34 edges all the way in the perimeter. So at this point, this looks nice and spaced out. And now we essentially want to start thinking about how this is going to become a perfect cylinder. And for that, we're going to use a cylinder, basically fill in between here and here. So I'll go to Create, Polygon Primitives, Cylinder. We need to rotate this first of all. So I'll enable the rotate tool. I'm going to hit R to do so. I'll hold down J. That's going to constrain to 15-degree increments. And then we also need to go in the history here. And since we have 34 edges outside, we need 34 divisions here. We'll type in 34. This is going to make our life very easy when basically matching up this so everything is nice and quadded. I'll hit R to go to the scale tool. I'll go ahead and scale this up like so to this first edge here in the blueprint. Something that I want to do is enable subdivisions here along the caps. I only need 2. And what that's going to allow me to do is actually breaks that pole. I can go in here and add an edge loop. And since we're all quadded, that's going to allow me to do so. So what I'm going to do is I'll disable transform constraints for the time being. And I'll basically just scale this in. Now we're losing the wireframe of our shape here. So what I want to do is go to shading and use wireframe on shaded. Now both wireframes of my meshes here are going to be displayed at once. So now I'm going to simply just scale this up slightly like this to match up with this edge. With the multi-cut tool enabled, I'll do Control, click here. Now we have these edges here matching up with our reference. And then simply what I want to do is basically just gut the inside of this cylinder out. So I'm just going to drag these faces, delete, and we should be able to bridge between these here. Now, something that I'm going to do, just the way the math worked out, is I need to rotate these slightly as the symmetry line here. You see how this, especially on a perfect cylinder, we don't want to add a symmetry line by doing this because we're not going to get a perfect cylindrical face. And this actually might look weird or cause pinching if we add just a division here. This is an easy fix. We can go in here and simply just rotate this. And that's why we have this as separate objects. And we're going to make sure that this is matched up perfectly. So now we'll still have that nice symmetry line and we'll have all our edges match up. So before we bridge between this, we actually have to combine these shapes. It's actually been a while since we jumped over to perspective. So let's do so and see what we have. And good thing that I did, we need to clean this up quite a bit. So we're going to select these faces here. We're only working with this flat plane so far. So we're just going to be left with this ring. We'll do the same exact thing here. We'll take all this thickness here, delete it, and we're essentially left with these planes. The other thing that we need to make sure is that they're exactly on the same level or the same plane. For that, we could jump over to the side view and you see that we have a discrepancy. This is a simple fix. What I'm actually going to opt to do first is combine these shapes. We'll do that by going to Mesh, Combine. Now these are combined. Now we'll jump over to the side view. We'll go to vertice mode. We'll select all our components. We'll go to the scale tool by hitting R and we can scale down flat. Now by scaling flat, all these are on the same exact plane. Looking at my real life reference, I think we can actually push this out just a little bit more to match up not only closer to the reference, but giving us a little bit more breathing room. I don't like to have these very, very tight connections here. So just giving us a little bit more breathing room is going to help like this. So I'll scale this up and now we can go ahead and do our bridge. So I'll jump here to perspective, double click here, double click here. Now it's important to always check, especially when doing a large bridge like this. Again, double click this edge loop 34, double click this edge loop 34. So taking a little bit of time and planning and matching up your edges, especially when doing bridging, especially when trying to stay all quadded, is very important. So I'll do shift right click and we'll do a bridge. This looks terrible. Sometimes with Maya, we have to spoon feed the bridge operation and not give it such a large span. So we know these are going to bridge nicely. Shift right click bridge. Those are bridged. Same thing here. We'll select this range and we'll select this range. We'll hit G to redo the last command. I'll double click and then deselect these corners here. Hit G once more. And now we have a perfect bridge. So this looks good. Now it's time to mirror our result once more. Shift right click mirror options. We need to cut. Everything should be good, but the direction needs to be flipped. We'll make sure that we're on wireframe on shaded. And now we can start giving this some shape. So you might be looking at this on perspective and think, we don't have any shape yet. Well, that is correct. But we spent all the time, all that hard work getting our topology all quadded and the edge flow perfectly where we need to go. So now we can define this shape very, very quickly. So we're going to start entering subdivision mode. So let's give this a preview by hitting 3. This is going to enter subdivision mode. And something that I am noticing here is a little bit of wonkiness here in the center. This is most likely because we have verts that are not merged. So again, we'll select all these verts here. We'll go to edit mesh and we'll select merge. Now, if we go back into sub D mode, this looks good. What I'm going to be doing here is actually splitting this and this off into 2 pieces. That way, if we want to model the can actually being opened, we'll be able to do so. Now, we're going to need a little bit more topology to make this happen because we're going to need a edge loop here to reinforce this shape. And we're also going to need an edge loop on the outside of this shape to reinforce this sharp edge. And doing a bevel is a great way of getting that result very quickly. So we're going to drop down to 2 and we're going to go ahead and nudge this fraction here like this. So now you see that we have 2 edges outside of this shape, which is perfect. We're going to actually repeat the same thing here. So here we have this pole and we actually want to shift it inward. And again, this is a great use of using the bridge tool, is that we can shift a pole from an outer area that might cause issues into an inner flat area that won't. So I'll go ahead and pick up these edges as well. I'll go back to the bevel tool, do the same exact thing, 2 segments. That means that we're going to be left with this nice edge in the inside and then 2 edges on either side. And I'm just going to adjust the fraction of this. So now we push this pole inward, and this, if we go back to our reference, this shape is actually one solid shape. So we need to push up. Anytime that you push up and you have 2 edges, that's going to cause issues. So we're actually going to delete this edge. If we were to select this edge here and move this up, like so, is not breaking properly because of this edge. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this edge altogether, and that way we have a nice flat plane that we can start shaping this from. So that's the first thing that I'll do, is I actually need to select these faces. So I'll select this ring. You can select one face here and then select the face next to it. It'll actually select that complete loop of faces, and then we can simply select this manually. There's a better way. Since our topology is nice and clean, we can go to select and we can do a grow command, and now we're going to grow this here, and we can simply start pushing this up, and we're going to get this break here. And now we're starting to do a little bit of shaping on our can. So this is a very, very subtle elevation shift. And I want to make sure I'm matching this up with my reference. Now that I established the shape here, now we could add those reinforcing edges here. So for that, we can go to the multi-cut once more. We can add an edge here. And we can add an edge here, add an edge here. If you want to be more precise, we can simply go back in here, do a bevel, and make sure that we have no chamfer, which it is, and then just drop this to 2 segments, that nice holding edge on either side. So now that we're getting down and dirty with sub D modeling, let's go ahead and select the material that's going to serve us better. Since this is going to be fairly shiny and specular, we want to see if we have any pinching. The default Lambert is not that good at that. It is a very, very flat material. So you want materials that are going to expose the flaws in your mesh. And for that, we need something with a little bit more specularity. So I'll right click on this mesh and I'll do assign new material. We'll get a blend and there we go. So now we'll simply turn off wireframe unshaded. We want to make this a little bit easier to see. We have a lot of history, so all these nodes represent history. Let's clear this up quite a bit. So I'll go to edit, delete by type, history. And now you see that this clears up all the nodes that we had in the background working, and we can find our blend node much easier. So I'm going to give this a little bit of a darker color so this is easier to see. And what I'm doing here is actually just looking and seeing how the light interacts with my shape, and this is looking very nice. We don't have any pinching or any artifact in here, which is good. We'll continue on down. Let's go ahead and take care of this separation. So at this point, this is going to be the next thing that we want to break up. For that, we need to detach these components. So I'll select this edge loop here. I'll go to edit mesh and detach. And while it looks like nothing has happened, now these are polygon islands that we can move. So for example, if we had an animation, I'll hit D to enter edit pivot mode, V to vert snap here. I'll enable the rotate tool by hitting E. And now you see that we could do something like this. Anytime that you have basically a polygon island or all components detached, if you run a separate command, Maya will automatically separate these meshes. So mesh, separate, and now we have two parts here, which is good. We'll turn on our wireframe unshaded once more. And at this point, we can select this inner part, do Shift I, select this outer edge. We'll hit W to go to our move tool, hold down Shift to do an extrude. We'll go back to the modeling toolkit here, and we'll do the multi-cut tool once more, holding down Control. We'll add a edge loop here. And I know this is a little bit overkill for the thickness, so we can always go back here and kind of adjust this as needed. If we bring back our shape here and do the same thing, do Shift I, give this some thickness by holding down Shift with the translate tool moving down like so, just capture some of the thickness here. We'll access the multi-cut tool once more, Control middle mouse click. And now we have a nice border edge here. So now if we bring both of these back by deselecting everything, hit Shift I, select both of these, go to 3 mode, and we disable wireframe unshaded. Remember, anytime that you do a command, you can middle mouse click if that was the last command. And there we go. Now we have this pristine cut line here that's going to aid us in animation if we need it. Now, the last little bit of shaping here before we finish the top is going to be right here. So we'll go back to 1 mode, we'll jump here. And again, this needs to be pushed down slightly. So I'll go to my face selection mode. We can select it here via the modeling toolkit as well, or just going to face mode by right clicking. And then I'm going to hold down tab. What tab's going to do is allow me to drag and actually paint the selection by dragging. Sometimes I like this mode better than doing the rectangular marquee. We'll go back to perspective, and this needs a similar treatment like we did here. And I am looking at my reference here and just kind of rotating it within my hand just to evaluate the depth of this small bit of detail. And these are very, very small details on these cans, so there's no need to go overboard. Since we have a pole here, this is going to break up our double clicking and selecting these edge loops. Maya has a nice select tool set, and one of them is select continuous loop, which is right here, or continuous edges. And now we're able to scoop this up. We'll shift and double click just to get this outer edge. And since this is all quadded with no poles breaking up that selection, we don't need to do that same command. Now we'll simply run another bevel to insert the holding edges, make sure that chamfer is off, and then we'll go drop down to 2 segments. We can put the fraction up just a little bit. So now if we go to 3 mode here, we get that nice pop of detail. We get that nice shape here. So the shadows and highlights are catching very, very nicely. So I like this so far. So I'll enable wireframe unshaded. We'll jump back to the top view. And I typically don't like to model with sub D mode on. So with both my meshes selected, I'll hit 1. And we'll work on basically finishing out the top of the can here. So this gray ring here is pretty much this deep recess that we have, and these two edges is basically just a tapering. So we're going to go ahead and drop this down. So now I'll go ahead and do an extrude. This needs to be thickened out, and you see that I'm trying to match the width of that little recess here. And now this is going to pop back up and form this outer lip of this can. So I'll hit G to redo the last command. We'll give this just a little bit of offset. We'll match this here. We'll move to the move tool and we'll simply move this up. And this is going to start to form this outer lip of this can. Now this is going to break slightly this plane here. I'm going to get the scale tool and just pop this in slightly like this. So I'm scaling this up just to match it here. And there's a little bit of a slant. I want to make sure that this breaks this height here. And at this point, we're going to go ahead and extrude one more time, holding down shift with the translate tool. And this is going to give us kind of that final height for the lip of this can. Now, this reference is giving us the height of this lip. So let's go ahead and move this into place here. We'll go to object mode, make sure we have both our pieces selected, and we'll move this up. And that way it's going to give us a better sense of scale. So you see that we're going a little bit overkill here with these heights, and that's why I took the time to build these blueprints out. So what I'll do is I'll take this edge here, probably needs to drop down quite a bit. So I'll move it down like this. And this recess here actually is going to drop into the can. I don't think we're that far off, meaning this actually goes below this lower line, or this gray thick area drops below the can here. I think we're not that far off with the height of this, and I think this is starting to feel about right. It looks like this got jacked up, but we'll fix this in a second. I'll show you an easy way to do so, but let's focus on finishing this out. So I'll take this edge, extrude it one more time, and we'll do a thickness here like so, matching it up once more with the reference. So we need to basically push this lip out a little bit more, like so. With the move tool, we could extrude down. One more extrusion. Keep an eye on the reference, and if you pay close attention here, Maya's telling you where that is. I'll do one more extrusion. I'll extrude down right about here. Now I want to round this shape out just slightly. So what I'll do is enable the multi-cut tool. We can go here. I have this hotkeyed as M. I'll do Control middle mouse click. I'll add a edge loop right in the middle, and we can go ahead and push this out very, very slightly. So I'll get the move tool and we can do Control middle mouse. It's going to push along the normal, which is a nice little touch here. And I'm going to push this out just a little bit more. Now what I can do is add a bevel, turn on the chamfer tool, just simply add 2 segments. And now we're going to get a segment here, And again, we can double click, move tool, and we can do Control middle mouse click, push on the normal, and we'll just take this, push it out a little bit further. So now we have a nice rounded lip. I quickly want to illustrate why I use a bevel with no chamfer. I think the easiest way to do so is by creating a polygon cube here. And I'm simply just going to duplicate this, move it holding down shift. So this one is going to get the edges with the bevel and no chamfer. So we'll bring down the fraction. We'll bring down the segments like so. And this guy is going to get the chamfered bevel. So again, we'll go ahead and do a bevel. We'll chamfer this one. Same exact settings. And if we go to sub-D mode, these look very, very similar. However, the main issue with this is that when doing sub-D modeling, a lot of times you have to strip those holding edges off and reestablish certain shapes. This bevel here with the chamfer destroyed this shape, right? So if we were to go back here and needed to strip these bevels for any reasons, if we delete this, you see that we jacked up our shape. So if we zoom in, you see the damage that it did. Compared to this, if we go here and simply reselect our holding edges, we can go back to that original shape without a problem. Before I add those holding edges, let me snap this into place. So with the move tool enabled, I'll hit D, go to edit pivot mode. You can hit plus or minus on your keyboard to scale up your manipulator. Now that we're in edit pivot mode, by hitting D, we can hold down V to vert snap, and I'll vert snap to this corner here. I'll hit W once more, hold down V, and now we're perfectly snapped. And we could see what's going on here a little bit better. Now we can simply go back, add all the edges that need to be reinforced. Sometimes, depending on the shape, I don't like to do all my bevels at once. So I'm going to start here, and this is going to give us more control. So we'll run a bevel here. We'll do 2 segments. We'll go to 3 mode. This looks pretty good. We'll select this guy here. We'll run another bevel. Again, 2 divisions like so. This is going to leave a nice hard crease here. We're going to select these guys here. Run another bevel. Again, 2 divisions. And you could obviously do these all in one swoop. However, you're going to have a little bit less control. And then finally, we'll go to this edge here and we'll do the same exact thing. Bevel, 2 segments, play with the fraction. Hit 3 mode on both of these. Take off the wireframe on shaded. The shortcut here is Alt-5. I'll start using that more. And this looks pretty good. Boom! You made it this far, and I know you're serious about becoming a 3D modeling pro. And guess what? You're almost done with the most challenging part of this project. Let's move on and create the tab. I just did a little bit of housekeeping. I deleted the history and also renamed both of these pieces accordingly. Now that that's done, I'll select both of them. I'll hit H, and that way we can focus on the tab. For this, we're going to go ahead and create the perimeter as well. So we're going to focus on just getting that nice curvature in there with the least amount of work possible. For that, I'll go to Create, Polygon Primitives, Cylinder. We'll look at the options here. I have set this to 24 with 2 cap divisions and set this up on the Y. I'll hit Create. This comes in perfectly. We're going to scale this up, and already this matches this outer radius perfectly. I'll select this edge here and I'll scale it up like this. And before I jack this up, I'm going to hit Control D and duplicate it. We're going to use this to build the top part, but we'll continue working on this. Now you see these edges actually match up pretty nicely to this shape, so no need to jack any of this up. What we can do is select this range, move it up like this, and maybe scale it down. And I'm not worried about these parts since these flat parts are going to get filled in properly. What we can do is, since this is already established, we can go from here to here. We can delete that and we'll jump to the perspective. We'll gut these out. So I'll select everything but the cap, delete that, and we'll do the same thing with these as well. So we're just left with the caps. Back here, we need to think about this topology a little bit. So this vert here, move it into place. Now we are losing a little bit of this shape. So for that, we'll go to the multi-cut tool and we'll drop a edge there, go to vertice mode, and we'll pop that in. Now, one thing to keep in mind is we are going to need more topology here, as this has quite a bit of curvature. So remember, details dictate density. But for now, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to build out the clean perimeter here and also here. Now, one trick that we can use here, since we have this pole and we can't really insert a edge loop here, we'll select this pole. We'll go to Edit Mesh and we'll do Chamfer Vertices. And this is going to allow us to pop a radial shape from a pole, which actually is going to work quite nicely for this. So now we're getting that nice radial shape out of that pole, which was kind of useless. So we'll go ahead and pop this here and we'll pop this here. Now, since both of these verts need to be pretty much straight, we can just select them both, scale them, establishing this clean edge flow, which is pretty much what we needed. Same thing here. We need a straight edge based off these 2 edges. Now for this, we need to be a little bit more precise. So with the scale tool enabled, we'll hit D to enter edit pivot mode, V to vert snap. We'll vert snap here. We'll hit R one more time, hit scale, and now we're scaling flat and we're getting these nice 2 flat edges. Let's work on this top part now. So I'll double click these faces here, move them into place, and I'll use the scale tool to quickly approximate this shape here on the top. So this is looking pretty good, and you can see how using this cylinder gets us to these curved, perfect curved surfaces a lot quicker. We'll do the same thing here, but we'll use this edge. We'll basically just use the scale tool to approximate this. This already looks pretty good. We'll select these bottom verts here, and then we'll scale flat, and then we'll move up like this. And then we'll start popping these towards the outside here. And then I'll simply select this range here, hit D, V. So I'm basically going to snap to this pivot. I'll hit R and we can scale flat. We're going to work with symmetry, so I'm not really worried about this extra fluff here. I can actually just go in here and start deleting it. So we'll delete this, we'll delete that. And now you see that we're building these perimeters pretty quickly. And this is going to speed us up in finishing out this tab piece. Let's go ahead and fill this gap here. So I'm going to extrude out and then scale that edge. I want to get here first before doing the bridge, so I'll start working my way up. Again, I'll select these edges, extrude up, scale flat like this. I'll go ahead and pop my target weld, and we're nice and quadded here. So we have 4 here, we have 4 here, and we have this extra one. So something's going to have to give. I could insert an edge loop here and see if this switches things up. And it should. So there we go. Just added that extra edge loop. And now we're 4 on 4. And this should work out fine. So we'll select this range here, shift right click, bridge. Not working. And that's why it wasn't bridged. We had that huge face inside. So with that deleted, it was just hard to see in the top view. But now everything looks good. And now we should be able to bridge that. So that was the issue. We'll go back in here and yeah, those sometimes it's good just to peek over into perspective just to see what's going on. So this is nice and filled up here, this gap. We can go ahead and just snap the pivot here and scale that flat. I'll take the multi-cut here, drop an edge loop, and then just make sure that these verts are merged. Let's go ahead and start connecting these here. And for that, I'll simply select these edges, scale them flat, and move them into place. I'll take this vert here, slide it over, kind of get that general angle. And same thing here, like so. Now these should be able to be bridged. Let's go ahead and combine them first. So we'll go to Mesh, Combine. We'll select this range, shift right click. We'll go to Bridge. Essentially all we're doing is just using these tools to capture this curvature on this flat plane that we're creating. Let's go ahead and fill this out here. So I'll take these edges here, shift, and then we can just scale flat. And we can do the same thing here, scale flat, take all these edit mesh. And since merge was the last thing that I did from edit mesh, I can just middle mouse click, use the right threshold. Now, one thing you will note, since I was adding edges randomly, this is no longer straight. So what we can do is make sure that we select all these edges here that are supposed to be on a straight line. We'll get the scale tool here. We'll hit D to edit the pivot. And essentially, we can just align the pivot to this edge here in the blueprints, hit scale, and now it's going to be scaled flat. Now, one thing you want to make sure is that we're on world when we do this, because we don't want to get janky results. We could always rotate it once it's flat as well. One thing that I'll do is I don't like to have these poles on a curved surface. Remember, this is going to get deleted soon. So what I need to do is kind of build this inner loop that's going to give us extra support and padding so this actually bends nice and smooth. For example, if we go in here, select this, hit delete, and we hit 3 mode. Now, it's not going to look bad, but once we give this thickness, we're not going to get the result that we want. So if we go in here, extrude this down, and then we'll simply add an edge loop. And now we go into 3 mode. And if I give this a blend and turn off the wireframe, you see we get this janky shading error. And that's because this pole is not properly isolated towards the flat plane of this. So we need to push this into the flat plane so we don't have these shading issues. So I'm going to Control Z. Go back to 1 mode here, and I actually want to keep these faces. And before I add the bevel, let's think about how this could be further refined. We're going to need an additional point here. So for that, I'll get the multi-cut tool, drop an edge loop in the middle. This is going to give us a little bit more resolution here. Let's go ahead and create this supporting edge. So we'll go here. This is the first one that we'll create. We'll go to bevel. I drop this down to 2. I'm doing Control Shift to get more control of that slider. And you see the beauty of that. It's keeping this edge in the middle and giving us this nice supporting edge on the outside. Now from this point, we'll go ahead and just move this into place. I'll get my Insert Edge Loop tool out and I'll drop a supporting edge right about here. So we'll work this in stages. I'll add 1 here and then we can simply just gut this out. Again, Insert Edge Loop tool, and then we'll simply need to connect this. So we'll get our spot weld tool like this. We'll enable edge slide and we'll just do a nice slide over here. Now we have these edges on both sides of this mesh. If you need to pull this a little bit more closer to the shape, we can select these verts and then hit B. That's going to enable our soft select, and we can just nudge this down. Remember, B and middle mouse click will basically change your radius. So B in scrubbing left and right. Now we can do it here like this, and we get that nice little fall off that is really helpful at times. I think we're good to delete this. I'll hit B to disable soft select. We can basically select this edge loop here. We'll do Shift right click, detach components. Now these are no longer attached, and now we can delete these. Just going to adjust these a little further. We can scale these flat, and this is looking pretty good. This is all quadded, and I think we are done with the main shape. So let's go ahead and mirror this over. I'll do Shift right click, mirror. No cut needed here on the geometry. X looks good. This looks good. Let's mirror this. Hit 3 mode. Looks like our center verts are merged. So now we have the perimeter here. Let's go ahead and jump into perspective mode. Enable the wireframe. And we need to do a little bit of shaping here on this because it does have a fall off here. So this center part actually lifts down a little bit. But before we do that, I want to have this little button here built out for reference. So we'll create a polygon primitive. Once more, cylinder options. We don't need to go that dense. Let's do 16 on the Y, and 2 is fine for the cap divisions. So this looks good. I'll bring this up like so, and then scale down quite a bit. These are just tiny little pieces of metal here, so they're not really that thick at all. So this part here has essentially a small dip. So I'll select all these faces and these as well. So I'll select this range. I'll hit B to enable the soft select, and then we'll just push down ever so slightly like this. These are not big changes in the shape at all. And I think what I'm going to do is continue this topology here just to give me a little bit of a better fall off. This is technically a deformation, and anytime your geometry follows your deformations, you actually just get better results on your mesh. So I'm going to slide this over. Let me take off soft select. We'll do a surface slide here. And the good thing about this is that we can take this edge loop here. We can bevel this, and now we're pulling out an extra edge here that might actually help us out. So let's just work on the spacing a little bit more. Since this is on a curved shape, this is not going to subdivide properly. It's going to be wonky. So we have to match these subdivisions on this. So we will need to plop an extra edge here. So I'll get the multi-cut tool. I'll do Control middle mouse click. And now that we added, we need to shape. So I'll use this extra resolution. Anytime that you add topology, use that extra topology to basically refine your shape, especially on curved surfaces. 9 times out of 10, they could use the extra love. So now this is going to be a lot more even because we have even quad distribution here. And I'm going to put this up here a little bit higher just to be able to match this vert here. And I'm just using a combination of the slide tools just to make sure that I'm sliding within my surface here. And now we can go back in here and select those faces. I'll hit tab here just to go in paint select mode. Not overly worried about the right side here. And we'll do a soft select, turn off edge slide. And now we're getting that nice feathering. You'll see the effect or the difference that one extra edge loop can do. We can always select this, hit B to deselect soft select, and then we can just push and pull along the normal. Remember, that's Control, middle mouse, drag to the left, And there we go. Now we have a nice little tapering here that goes into this nice flat area. Let's finish out this bun real quick. We're going to be optimizing a little bit here, so we really don't need to see anything from the bottom. So we could actually delete these faces. I'll double click this, shift right click. We'll go ahead and do detach, face mode, double click, delete. So now we're just left with this cap with a little bit of thickness. We'll go in here and we'll do a bevel, drop this down to 2 and play with the fraction. It's going to give us a nice holding edge. And then maybe we can go in here and just scale this out like so. This looks good. And then we'll drop this down into place. And now it's time to give this tab some thickness. Now, since this might be animated and you might see the backside, I will do a normal extrude. So I'll just select this, extrude, and then it doesn't matter. If you want to go down with it, that's fine. I'll show you how to fix this issue here. It's just a normal issue. Do Control Shift just to get some gradual control. Now, when I'm doing things that add volume, sometimes I want to see how it ties in to my whole piece. So with this enabled, I'll go ahead and bring everything back. So I'm going to take my objects here. Make sure that I'm on world. If you're on object trying to move both of these, you might get weird offsets. So when I'm moving multiple objects, I like to do shift right click and control just to bring up your transform options. I'll go to world, zoom out, and then I'll hit F to frame on this. Then we'll fix the normal issue here, but I like to just get a good view of these shapes together before making these decisions. And right now this feels a little bit like it could use extra thickness. So what we can do is with this selected, we'll go to the attribute editor by hitting Control A, and we could actually deal with the extrude here that we did within the history. And you see that by playing with that history, we're effectively affecting the thickness once more. So this looks like a little bit too much. So let's meet somewhere in the middle. Come in here and do 1.6, negative 1.6. Now we'll simply just select our faces here. So we'll go to Mesh Display, hit reverse, and there we go. I'll select both of these objects here. Right click, assign existing material, blend. We'll apply the same blend. Now it's just a matter of reinforcing these edges. Now, one thing to keep in mind is these tabs are actually quite a bit soft. So for this, I'm actually going to use a chamfer on my bevel. But this is simply just to give it a little bit more shape versus a holding edge. So we'll go in here and we'll kind of work with the outside first. And we'll just kind of shape this up a little bit like this. And I'll treat all these inside faces the same. I want to meet somewhere in the middle here. But yeah, I think this looks pretty good. We'll go ahead and go into sub-D mode for all these. And I'm simply just going to scale this out slightly like this, just to give it a little bit more thickness. So wireframe looks good, and this shape looks good. Woo! That's what I'm talking about. You just finished the tab, wrapping up the most complex parts of this model. The rest of this model's details are much simpler, allowing us to complete it much quicker. Now we're going to go ahead and move on and finish the body of the can. And for this, I'll be concentrating and using the front view. I'll select my can here, make sure that I'm on one mode. We're going to take this edge here with my translate tool enabled. I'll hold down shift and I'll move this into place. And I'm essentially looking to see where this shape starts to break. And by break, I mean the bend right here. So what I'll do is I'll actually put this edge right in the middle of this curve right here. And then I'll simply scale out like this, move tool once more, and we'll extrude all the way down. And here, since we'll be working at the bottom, I also want to hide the grid. So I'll go to Show, Viewport, and we'll hide the grid in the perspective view. With this edge selected, I'll go to the Extrude tool, and I'll go ahead and get some thickness going here, like this. And what I can do is go to wireframe mode, and we could see that little yellow spike. That's where that edge is, and that's going to help us essentially establish the placement. I'll go to my move tool, move this down like so. So this looks good. I'll hold down shift, extrude down, and then with the scale tool, go ahead and scale inward like this. Now the bottom of this can does have a lip. So holding down shift With the scale tool, go ahead and extrude inward and build this lip up. And then we're going to simply extrude up here. We'll do one more extrusion. And then we'll do Control Shift right click, merge collapse, merge edges to center. And that's going to cap that out. And then what we can do from this point is select these edges here, do a bevel with a chamfer, and we'll put the fraction up quite a bit here. We'll actually do it all the way out here. We will need to merge these verts. That's not a problem. So I'll go to vertice here and we'll go to edit mesh, merge. Now these verts are merged. Let's go ahead and take care of the shaping here. So I'll double click here and we'll run another bevel. This time we will have a chamfer, and this is a hotkey here. I basically have this command hotkey, but you're welcome to use this as well. We'll do the same thing here. We'll select this edge and this edge. I'll run another bevel just to round this out. And then here as well, we'll run a bevel because we'll actually need a sharper edge here. So with the series of bevels, we're just rounding this out. Let's see how this looks in sub D mode. Now, one thing is this cylindrical cap is causing issues because we have this big span. So again, we can select this pole here. We'll go to edit mesh, chamfer vertice, and this is going to allow us to essentially just drop another edge here like this. So if we up the divisions, now with the multi-cut tool, I'll add an edge here and just adding a little bit more divisions here. This should help this out. So again, we'll do an extrude. And then now we could do shift right click, merge collapse, merge edges to center. And let's hit 3 mode once more. And yeah, we got that nastiness situated. A lot of times those poles, especially if you don't have enough loops here to kind of contain that, you will see a little bit of artifacting. So that looks cleared up. So in the front view here, let's go ahead and scroll up. So we'll go to the top here and run the same thing that we've been doing, just a bevel, add a couple divisions with a chamfer, just to round that out as well. And we'll do that as well here. And you can see that running those bevels can do quite a bit of rounding work for us. Now, this is a very big span for this can. So if we go here, you'll see that this edge here, I'll select it here. But once we go into 3 mode, you see how far that shoots up. And ideally, we don't want that. Now, we won't have to go as dense as we did here because we don't have the details that dictate that. But we do want a couple of edge loops. That way we're containing and we're not really losing this information here. So what I'll do is with the multi-cut tool, I'll do control middle mouse click. I'll drop an edge right in the middle. I think this should suffice. And now if we go back to 3 mode, you see this edge is a lot better contained. And we could probably go in here again and actually drop one in the middle here, just to further reinforce that edge. So, you know, in sub D mode, the closer this edge gets, the more this is going to be contained. But I think this is going to hold the shape rather nicely. The last thing that I want to do is sell the illusion here of this lip. Right now we have pretty much a hard transition, but if we go to 3 mode, we're losing a lot of that. And on these cans, this piece right here is actually folded over. So we're going to sell the illusion that there's a lip here. So for that, again, we'll use the multi-cut tool. We'll drop a very, very tight edge loop to this. Now what we can do is select these faces here and basically extrude up. And this is just going to basically push up here. It's going to make the illusion here that this is folded over. And again, we're going to need to mark this hard. So we'll need these 2 edges here. We'll do one more bevel. This time we'll do it here with the options because chamfer is off. And we can go ahead and drop this down to 2. And now if we go to 3 mode, you see this is going to look nice. It's going to sell that illusion. And once we have ambient occlusion, lighting, this is really going to read as 2 separate forms. So I'm just doing a final check here. Everything looks good. All our shapes look good. No visible pinching. Before I call this done, I'm going to select all my pieces here. Edit, delete by type history. And then we'll simply go ahead and rename each piece. This is can, this is opening. This is going to be the tab. And this is going to be the tab pin. I'll go ahead and save this final file. Congratulations, you did it. You completed the entire tutorial. Hopefully now you can put your new skills to work to create the next great 3D model, or who knows, you might even land a high-paying gig doing some product design renders. Of course, since you followed my tutorial, it's only fair we split it 50-50. Huh? Alright, I was just joking, but if you did find some value out of this tutorial, please give it a thumbs up and let me know that you want more in-depth tutorials like this by subscribing to this channel. What was your biggest takeaway from this tutorial? Let me know in the comment section down below. You just completed this beginner's tutorial, you leveled up your 3D modeling skills, and now you're ready to move on and create more complex hard surface pieces. If you want to create those detailed models, you'll need to deepen your understanding of topology. And for that, I created this video right here.